Hi there, and welcome again to Peninsula Players Presents, the history of Peninsula Players history. I'm here again with Audie. Hello, Audie.
Hi, Greg.
How are you today?
I'm doing pretty good today.
Excellent, excellent. And we are going into, I realize now this is, the theater's been around for 23 years
Yes,
already.
yes.
So at the end of our last interview, we covered 1957. And the big thing that, to remind you, that happened that year was that the all-weather pavilion went up, which was very exciting for everyone. So that replaced the canvas canopy that had been there for a number of years and was helpful, but not always.
Right. Yes, it still had its issues as
Yeah.
well.
Yes, and we had left you with a story about Harvey Korman being chased out of the county with a shotgun. When we're thinking never to return, but we were wrong, weren't we?
We were wrong. He comes back and he's going to direct and act.
Yes, indeed. He'll be very involved in this coming season in 1958. So we're happy to have you back, Harvey.
Yes.
Also, at the end of the last year, we left Caroline in the hospital, right? And the
Yes.
Rathbones, Caroline and Rodian Rathbone and family moved to Chicago, where they opened a wharf gift shop there.
They
And
did.
they lived
Yes.
above it, right?
They did. And Marion, Rodian's mother, came to join them. So she was there as well and helped run the shop and look after the kids while Rodian was flying, and Caroline continued to schedule show train tours.
Yes. And that shop was at 1702 North Wells. Don't go there now, it's not there anymore. Yes, and so they continued working on the show trains. There was one in December of 57.
Yes, there
And
was.
and then in February of 58, this year.
They Yep, they called it their Valentine Day train, and they Caroline stretched to also include attending ballet um, concerts as well. So it was productions, and she was gathering people from all over Wisconsin. So it wasn't just Green Bay and Door County people who were taking these adventures. They were from Janesville and Sheboygan and La Crosse and Escanaba, Michigan and Madison. And it really was enriching all of Wisconsin's love of the arts. So it to me it's very fascinating. So that she was gathering all of these people and bringing them to Chicago to see professional theater
And
and
dance.
just and dance. Yes.
Nice. And then in February, there was the Valentine's show train. And then there was another one in March.
Hmm.
And
Yes. And then they got to see a variety of shows from A Long Day's Journey into Night and My Fair Lady. And Caroline would arrange conversations with some of the cast members.
mm,
And in My Fair Lady, there was a young man who had graduated from UW-Madison and was in the show. And so she got him to be a guest speaker. And the critics from Madison thought that this was a great value to go see these shows. They went to see The Diary of Anne Frank. And when they also saw the show train, one of the actors was supposedly had flu with Rodian Rathbone during World War II, so they had a conversation with him too, and he ended up had performed with Basil Rathbone, Rodian's dad, in Romeo and Juliet prior to that. So it was when I read all that,
the
these
world.
it is small world. So these the patrons who were on the trains were like writing these descriptions and travel logs of their adventures and sharing all of that. So
Wow, interesting. And then also in February of 58, Sturgeon Bay experienced something extraordinary.
they did. They got dialed telephones. Does
No,
anybody in Sturgeon Bay remember having public service lessons? The phone company came and was teaching students and the general public how to use a dialed telephone. So
because what was there before?
before it was a system where you picked up, you didn't have a dial, but you got a hold of the operator. So it was operator. You spoke the number that you wanted to dial and they connected you and, connecting. And to put in this system, the first dial phone was invented around 1919, but the system to install it in communities was very expensive.
So someone with a dial telephone could dial the number and directly connect to.
And directly connect. Yes.
It's funny today that young kids growing up, not acquainted with dial telephones, have no idea how they work.
No, and they have no idea what a busy signal is. Because it goes to voicemail.
Right. So also in 1958, what was going on around also had some effect on Peninsula Players, though this first item didn't. The United States launched Explorer 1 on January 31st, 1958, the first satellite. And also at that time in that year, efforts at school desegregation in the southern United States were met with rather impassioned resistance that was going on. But one of the things that did affect the players was that there was an economic slowdown in the US, which caused a rise in unemployment.
Right, and that goes on throughout the 1958 season. So there's massive unemployment going on across the country, and just it's a struggle. It's a struggle for everyone.
And Caroline's struggling with the mortgage payments.
She is. So she's got this mortgage now that was set up by her board members. Instead of a 20-year mortgage, a 3-year mortgage. So she's got to figure out how to do those payments. And so she's still recovering her health from having rheumatic fever. The patrons who were on the show train did mention that, she did look cheerful and she did seem energetic, but, I don't know how much that affected her. So,
well, we just spoke about some of the shows and events that people on the show trains were able to see in Chicago, but also around films at the time included Gigi and Cat on a Hot Tin Roof, which is interesting because during this season, the Players does the play version of Cat on a Hot Tin Roof. And in songs,
we had Catch a Falling Star, which is lovely. The Chipmunk Song,
which is lovely.
Which is Volare.
Yes.
And Purple People Eater, which was written by or sung by an actor who actually starred in High Noon with Gary Cooper.
I can actually sing some of that song still, but again, I will not do that. Interesting grouping of books at this time included A Raisin in the Sun by Lorraine Hansberry, Dr. Zhivago by Boris Pasternak, and Breakfast at Tiffany's by Truman Capote. And then on Broadway in New York, we had a bunch of blockbuster shows.
We did. We had West Side Story.
I know that show.
You know that show? The Music Man. Look Back at Anger. The Entertainer.
And both of those were by John Osborne, British playwright.
And The Visit,
which starred Alfred Lunt and Lynn Fontanne, who were a well-known Wisconsin Genesee Depot couple.
Yes, and they're going to come up during this season too.
Also, yes. One of the things as we were going through 1958 that we were not able to cover was any connection of the Players with Jose Ferrer.
Really? Oh no.
It turns out for some reason over the last years, someone with the Players has been connected with Jose Ferrer. So I had to go ahead and find out what the heck
Jose was doing. Okay, what was he doing then? Okay.
Well, in 1958, he was married to Rosemary Clooney.
Oh, okay.
Good to know, and had a family. And he both directed and acted in the film I Accuse, and he was in a movie, The High Cost of Loving, with Gina Rowlands. So now we know. And
now we're caught up on Jose.
Yes. So as we're going into preparing for the 58th season, on June 6th, Caroline had an announcement.
She did. She's, I believe, stopped by the Madison newspaper to let them know that Peninsula Players was postponing Love's Labor's Lost with the Peninsula Music Festival because the composer, Victorio, could not come to Wisconsin for the process. So she wanted him to be there for the rehearsal process and to be part of the presentation.
And
So
that was
she
going to
lets
be a
them.
big production.
It was still being advertised towards the end of May. I had found a news article still promoting it. And then at the beginning of June, she uh, stopped by to let them know that this wasn't, that Peninsula Players was going to postpone it. So
But the music festival did do the music later.
they did towards on the closing performance of their festival. And that would come up in late August of
I
that
see.
year.
And Caroline was very good with the press in terms of
She
stopping.
was. She was, her, whether it was in her nature to do this or something she just thought of herself, but rather than just issuing a press release or making a phone call, when she would return to the state, either to Green Bay or to Madison, when she was in those communities, and including the Door County Advocate, she would stop by the businesses. So just like she went on her handbill route, she would stop by and visit the reporters. She'd visit the art critics and go and talk to them. And in the anniversary booklet, one of the reporters has great memories of she'd stop by in one of her fabulous outfits, and being the beauty that she was, I was the star of the newsroom because all of the other reporters were jealous that this fabulous star was coming in to talk to me. So
No one in a newsroom has said that about me when I've stopped by there. And as we're going into the lineup of the personnel this year, one of the things that affected things was that Leo Lucker, who has been the director, he's on a national tour.
He is. He had the previous winter left early to join the Broadway cast of Carousel. And then he leaves that production to join the national tour of Auntie Mame. So he gets to play the banker, kind of the
The guardian of the
thank
boy.
you. Yeah, either the guardian or the person looking over the nephew's money.
Boy,
So he has a very kind of important role, and he's all over the country in 58 from coast to coast.
and because of that, Caroline hires a new general manager.
Yes, Walter Martini, who had been very involved with the Goodman School of Drama up to that point.
Mhm.
So, and then she asks Harvey Korman to come back. So that's how Harvey revisits the picture, and she decides to do a rotation of directors. So Harvey doesn't direct all of the shows, but he's in a majority of them that season as well.
And the directors are Harvey, Jim McKenzie, and Jim's wife, Jean Boland,
Yes.
during the season. And at this time, Edith Dunn, who had been bookkeeper and taking care of the gardens, was retired to Maine.
Yes.
And Jean Boland
Takes over the gardens for her, and so Jean's now doing that. So they've arrived early enough to have that, get everything ready for the preseason.
and going through this, I was remarking to myself how Jean Boland was everywhere, not only taking care of the gardens, but directing and acting.
And acting, exactly, getting as much involved as Caroline was. So it was, this aspect of this is, important, and not just that, but passionate. It's that dedication, not just to the craft, but to the organization, to the family that they've all created there.
Right. Caroline also hires Richard S. Davis.
And from what I've gathered about Richard had moved to Ephraim a few summers before that, and he was a Door County resident and a business manager for a stone company, I believe. So
Here he is
he's
at the
helping.
Players now. So also at this time, the Wharf gift shop reopens, right?
It does. And Rosa Dooley returns. So she was teaching art classes the year before. And whether she's doing that or not, I'm not sure. But Caroline has some grand ideas for the Wharf gift shop to host jazz jam sessions after shows. And so Rose's husband, Philip Dooley, he's a band leader and had written a song that was pretty popular, called Purple Heart, I believe, in there. And so she's thinking of getting these jazz musicians together and having these sessions after shows, after performances. So
And we're not quite sure if those actually happened during.
yeah, I'm not sure if they happened, and it did make me wonder what the neighbors thought.
Well, we do have to think about them. Yes.
Yes.
So, as we mentioned, Jim McKenzie and Jean Boland, his wife, are returning. Casey Bragdon, Maggie Magerstadt, Bill Munchow, Maurice Odinger, and of course, Harvey. And Mama and Papa Fisher have retired.
They have that. They are in California with or Richard and Margot are.
Unfortunately, Vivian Fairchild came back as the cook.
She did, and she's keeping everybody well fed for the season.
Yes, thank goodness. And last but not least, Bob Thompson did not return this season.
He did not. He was he maintained he was continuing to work at Rosary College, but he was also working with Music Tent Theater in Chicago and the Hinsdale Summer Stock Company. So he was doing productions throughout that time.
Yeah, including Drury Lane Theater in Evergreen Park.
Yes.
In
Yes.
Chicago. And Bob didn't return to the Players again until 1964, I think you said.
Right. And whether that was by choice or because he had some strong opinions about the pavilion going up, and he really sort of felt that it wasn't the right time to be doing it. And so he and Caroline just and that's what's going to happen. Not everything is sunshine and roses, and family is going to quibble about some things once in a while. So
Yeah, so I wouldn't know anything about that.
no.
And then with Mama Fisher gone, the costumes were done by like a mishmash of people.
They were kind of pulled in pieces. So like the previous season, Dr. Maurice's widow and Heloise pulled together some costumes. There's time Caroline has a costume credit for it. And there's times that the apprentices who are part of the season have the costume credits listed. And so they're learning the craft. So these performers who have studied with Uta Hagen and have all these roles in other summer stocks, they're also pulling together the costumes. So it's still a whole company effort to put on these shows.
And in late June, then there's an announcement of possible shows they might do.
Correct. Yes, they were thinking of doing The Baker, Death Takes a Holiday, The Inspector Calls, Summer and Smoke, The Diary of Anne Frank, and Outward Bound.
And did they do any of them?
No.
No. So that's a process we weren't sitting in on, but they didn't do any of those shows that they were thinking about.
Yes.
But they did open the season.
They did, and it was an exciting and different opening from anything they had ever done before.
Mm-hmm.
And that was because the Kiwanis requested that they perform Tea House of the August Moon at their convention in Chicago in July. So Caroline agreed to do this, and she got a hold of the Armory to get the Jeep back for another loan period. And Harvey directed the production. So the previous season, it was, I believe, Bob, if I remember correct. And the scenic designer came back and they tweaked things a little bit, but they took the production to Chicago and performed it for the convention.
At the Medina Temple.
At the Medina Temple. And then they packed everything up and came up north back to Door County and opened the season on a Thursday night, which is not a time frame that they've ever opened before. And then scheduled double shows to kind of make up the box office for not opening at the right time. So this is the first time they kind of went on tour and opened with a show. So
yes. So they opened at the Players on July 3rd, and added 2 shows on Saturday at 6 and 9:30, and the Sunday curtain stayed the same.
Sunday curtain stayed the same, and they were planning then for the entire season to offer 2 shows on Saturday. So they went to 6 o'clock and 9 o'clock, and part of it was because what they noticed on Saturday nights was that people were arriving late because they were still at dinner for dinner reservations, or they were complaining they couldn't get home in time. It was a late arrival time for them to get back home because they were traveling a distance to get there. So what is now up to Door County is a 4-lane highway. It wasn't that
Mhm.
back then. So she came up with this idea to have the 2 different curtain times so that the 6 o'clock curtain time people could arrive early and still make it home at a decent time afterwards. So
And we believe that stayed that way the rest of the season.
the rest of the season, yes.
And after Tea House of the August Moon, See How They Run by Philip King. So a
Mhm.
fun comedy, opened July 8th.
Yes.
Had also been in the 1952 season, but
Mhm.
people were very happy to see a show like that again.
Yes, they were.
Mackenzie directed that.
Yes, and Harvey was in it as a corporal, and Jean Boleyn was also in the show.
And a huge thing at this time in July of 58 that we have to relate to you is that the hula hoop fad began. Good to know, hey?
Hula, hula hoop, hula hoop.
Again, something I grew up with. After that, on July 15th, Visit to a Small Planet opened, which was directed by Harvey Korman.
And it was the 3rd show he was in uniform. So his costume up to this point has just been military uniforms
Yeah,
within the season.
and he got some nice reviews there, didn't he?
He did. He was commented on for having a really good comic versatility. And I think that's kind of exciting to how he's been developing that. And in his bio for that season, it mentioned he was developing a nightclub act and that it should be a riot. And really, the development when you're looking at these shows, and I know you've mentioned this before, Greg, a show a week.
Mhm.
It's a lot to be directing and acting in them, but it's a really a development of skill sets in order to prepare for a weekly television show.
Sure.
And Harvey went on to do that. He went on to be on the Danny Kaye show and winning 4 Emmys for his work on the Carol Burnett show. So it's, you know,
A theater like the Players can offer a very good training program
exactly.
background. Yeah.
Mhm. Yes.
And
And
then,
Visit to the Small Planet was also one of the show train shows. So I think Caroline threw that in there because she was able to see it in the Chicago production with Cyril Richtard. I believe it's
Cyril Richard.
Richard. There we
He
go.
was
Thank
in
you.
Peter Pan with Mary Martin.
Yes, Captain Hook.
Yes. So the next show, Tobacco Road, opens July 22nd. It's directed by Jim Mackenzie. And some of the reviews talked about not bringing the kids, right?
Right, because it's a little bit more salty and a little bit more adult in its presentation. So they just suggest to leave the kids at home for this production that they do. And I know we've talked about company members who rejoined us, but we also had some new company members coming in. And among them was, for this production, Madeline Turtellow.
Mm-hmm.
And Madeline has been known to Door County residents for a while because she's an artist in the area, but this is the first time she's been on the stage at Peninsula Players. And so she's a member, joined there, and she's a very active lover of the arts. Madeline's family had a summer home in Ephraim, and so she grew up every summer in Door County. She loved the arts. They encouraged her to grow in the arts and sent her to France to help learn that. And she actually learned how to sketch and study painting on the porch of what is now the White Gull Inn with an award-winning artist, Vladimir Rusov, who was part of the Art Institute of Chicago. And she just has this incredible history and story. And Madeline also studied painting in Mexico. She got to know John Steinbeck, and was involved with his film, The Pearl. They invited her to help do that. So she became interested in filmmaking and um, sculpture, as well as just a talented artist. And she always wanted to start an art school. And eventually she did. And she actually started 3 different art schools. One of which was the Ephraim Art School that she started in 1943. That was there until 1949. And then she founded the Door Harbor School of Arts in Fish Creek in 1965, which grows into the Peninsula Arts School, which is still there today.
Mhm.
And in between there, in around 1947, she started the Gallery Studio in Chicago on North Michigan, in North Michigan's Art District. So she had all these art activities, all these painters and artists, and she did travel log films, and is just an amazing person and very vibrant personality. And so she becomes part of the acting company for this season.
And there was also something called the Art Colony.
The Art Colony, yes. With the Art Institute of Chicago, there were people, newspapers would print up that this was the Art Colony. So there were scholarships and a lot of students who came up to Door County during those early years to study painting, to study sculpture with Vladimir and other artists from the Chicago Art Institute. So they just referred to things as the colony.
Mhm.
And so when Peninsula Players started and they said there's now a theater being founded at the Art Colony, this is kind of all of that verbiage and where that wording came from.
So we here introduced someone who was responsible for some organizations in Door County
Mhm.
that are a huge part of the fabric of the area. And then after, and that was Tobacco Road. Madeline was also in separate tables later. The Matchmaker opened on July 29th, which featured Jean Leslie and Harvey Korman in the leads. And then after that, we have the Cat on a Hot Tin Roof by Tennessee Williams opened on August 5th.
At this time, the Capital Times of Madison had also commented on Cat on the Hot Tin Roof. There was somebody visiting who said that during the week that we were on the peninsula, people were buzzing about the sensational play at Fish Creek Playhouse. Tennessee Williams, The Cat on the Hot Tin Roof. The play is embellished with a lot of profanity and innuendo on sex and marital difficulties. So it's a subject matter, not that anything was lewd on stage, but the topic matter was very sensitive or taboo for the older audience members. Not so much the younger audience members, but the older audience members thought it was not right. And so the Green Bay Press Gazette review, who gave kudos to Harvey, was saying that the performance proved to be a very gripping and very absorbing experience, and we were sure for many of the audience very shocking, both in language and situation, and certainly no place for children. But it's also, in many important senses, a very moral play, eminently serious in purpose and never merely sensational. Williams fulfills his reputation for hurling the actual blood and bone of life onto the stage. So it was a very fair assessment. You know, I thought the writer, William Weaver, did a really good job critiquing, you know, what the effects of the audience and everything else. And there was also a columnist in Ephraim who reported all of the scuttlebutt that guests were talking about around her that she would hear, and how some of an 18-year-old was disappointed they didn't get to see the show, and others were disappointed as to, like, why should we go see this when we didn't want to in Chicago because we objected to it seeing it there. So it really was, you know, when they say it's the talk of the county, this production was the talk of the county at that time.
Cat on a Hot Tin Roof by Tennessee Williams. And as you said, Harvey Korman directed it. And I want to also note that he was directing that during the day, rehearsing, and he was acting in The Matchmaker in the evening.
in the
A
evenings.
very, very full schedule.
Hmm. Very much.
And then around this time of Cat on a Hot Tin Roof, we find we have a new business manager listed.
Right. I was looking through the playbills and I was a little confused, and I don't have an answer as to why, but Walter Martini is no longer listed as the general manager, and now Richard is, and somebody else is
S.
listed.
Davis.
You're right. And so there was this shift in staffing, and Edith's not there to, keep there's always the formidable Edith keeping everybody in line. While she's not there to do that. So there's been this little mix up and upheaval. And
So, and then continuing with the season, The Great Sebastians opens August 12th with Harvey and Jean again in the leads.
mhm.
And this was a show where Jazz Combo was involved.
Yes, they had, so Philip Dooley was going to be there with members of the different band, and he had all these very talented jazz musicians to join him, including a drummer who had worked with Louis Armstrong. And so that was very exciting, and they were going to do jam sessions, and I think this was also the same group that was supposed to play at the Wharf. They would offer these concerts in between performances on Saturday nights, so if you just wanted to go hear the band, you could pay a separate admission fee. Otherwise, admission was included with a ticket to the performance. So they
And
had that kind of exciting
yes,
stuff
and
going
this
on.
Jazz Combo was actually part of the Great Sebastians production.
Yes.
And the Great Sebastians was an Alfred Lunt and Lynn Fontaine vehicle, and that they toured, and one of those actors ended up in the Players production.
Yes, Burns Oliver, who was in the Broadway production with them and also toured with them, was a member of the company that season. And he had also been cast in the national tour of Tea House of the August Moon. So he reprised his role that he had done across the country for audiences for the Kiwani performance, as well as for those in Fish Creek. And so Burns Oliver was a member of the company that season, and he had numerous credits all over the country and off Broadway and everything else. So that was kind of exciting. So they extended an invitation to the couple in Genesee Depot to see if they'd come. And
And we don't know if they did or
we
not.
don't know. No.
I hope they did. So after that, we open Separate Tables on August 19th, which Harvey Korman directed, and Madeline Turtelot was in. And that's actually two plays.
Right. And so there was one, I think they did it in two separate acts. So they did one play first and then the second one. And it's one of the few shows that we have photos of.
From that
Otherwise,
time.
this season's kind of scarce for that too. So
Yeah. And then around this time, as per usual, the Door County Fair is happening.
yes, and I was so excited. I don't know why I was so tickled to see that Gene Autry came to Door County
With his
with his
horse.
horse Champion. So here's this singing cowboy that made Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer famous and all these movies. And Champion had his own comic book. There was this whole series. And so to have Gene Autry at the Door County Fair, I was like, oh my gosh, that's exciting for the county.
Indeed. And then we get to the last show of the season, No Time for Sergeants, which opened August 26th and went to August 31st. Gene Boland directed that one. And Caroline was involved in that one.
She was. And so Caroline is credited for the small role called Preacher. And Maurice Ottinger played the main character that Andy Griffith did in the film. And Maurice grew up in Tennessee, 30 miles from the location of where this play takes place. So he naturally had the Tennessee drawl and dialogue. And one of the reviewers commented that it's worth the price of admission just to hear Maurice say dog. And I have no idea if I said that even correctly.
You said it pretty good. So we get to the end of the season, And one of the things we wanted to mention was that a gentleman named Kurt Lundell designed all the sets for that season.
This season and the previous season. So this was his second season, and he was leaving that autumn to go join the Yale drama program to work on his master's in scenic design. So, and he was a graduate of the Goodman School of Theater. So, being the dutiful historian that I am, I went to Google and looked
Mm.
him up and discovered, oh my gosh, he had designed more than 75 different productions, including several that were on Broadway. He received 3 Drama Desk Awards for his designs and also was nominated for a Tony Award. And I was like, oh, wow. And he was originally from Sweden. So here's Caroline gathering all these artists. And Richard, no, we've got somebody from Iceland, and now we have somebody from Sweden.
And so once again, we're at the end of the season, and later on, a couple events. Milton Collian spoke, had a speaking engagement.
He did. He went to speak to the women's auxiliary at the Door County Memorial Hospital, who over the course of the year is also trying to raise funds to build a new hospital location, and they're having trouble with that because of the recession. The fundraising efforts aren't as successful as they would hope it to be.
Mm-hmm.
And so Milton goes to try to help, with his speaking engagement to increase that.
And then after the season, also the Rathbones, Caroline, Rodian, and family moved to New York.
They do, because Rodian is now back flying from New York to Paris. So his job as a TWA pilot has changed. So New York is just a better location for the entire family to be located so he can do those trips.
And also at this time, I want to mention that Harvey Korman expressed some thoughts about Caroline this season.
He did. Back in the early 90s, there was a filmmaker who was able to interview some Peninsula Players alumni for a documentary he was working on. And in those conversations, Harvey mentions not only how charismatic and mystical Caroline seemed to be, but that at the time that he was working there, she was also seemed to be very ill and fragile at the time. And but he was still impressed in how she could work with the tradesmen and get everything accomplished. And in hindsight, I kept looking at, when I look through the newspaper articles, Caroline's not as actively mentioned with either speaking engagements or doing things for the players that season. So it just made me feel that rheumatic fever, there's still something lingering, and that she's not as strong as she used to be, and she's fragile. That was the word Harvey used, was fragile at that
And
time.
unfortunately, as we get into the next year in 59, Caroline is going to be getting in a car accident.
Mm-hmm.
And as you say, things begin to tumble in
Yes.
1959. Edith Dunn is retired, and so I think there's some bookkeeping problems that come up.
There is, and Edith was very diligent up until that point, and there's going to be a little bit of a tumble that we're going to see.
So you will have to tune in again next time when we talk about 1959 and where these events lead us. So thanks for being with us. Thank you, Audie.
Thanks, Greg.
And we'll see you next time.